Hey everyone, Curse Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted, and here we are again with 12th Doctor Demonstrate, or 12 Doctor Battles, depending on what catches your eye the most. This is one of our donation decks of the week. It comes to us by Lexa, who says, bringing back the 12th Doctor Battles deck, as now it has much more of a direction after that last episode with it. Now we are at the stage of trying to figure out what works and doesn't in that direction rather than the direction itself. Also, there's been some MH3 cards, specifically Power Balance, that seem cracked in this deck. Yeah, absolutely there are. And there's even one that I think you didn't see. Thank you so much, Lexa, for setting this deck again. And if you haven't watched the original version of this deck, I might link it down below so you can. This deck has come really, really far, and I'm really excited in the direction we're going in. But before we get any further, let's revisit our commanders and see what we're trying to do. If you'd like to take a look at the deck list we're talking about today, or if you'd like to submit your own deck list to me so that I can make a video assisting your deck, please check the video description down below. So who is the 12th Doctor and why are they in charge of our Demonstrate deck? I say in charge, not commander. That's funny. The 12th Doctor is a 5 mana Izzet that's blue and red legendary Time Lord Doctor, 4/4. They have two abilities, with the first one being the most important one. The first spell you cast from anywhere other than your hand each turn has Demonstrate. The way Demonstrate works is as you cast that spell, you may copy it, and if you do, you choose an opponent who also gets the copy. Now, what's important to remember is that they will resolve their copy first, and then yours after. So that's very, very useful in terms of certain timings and things like that, especially with bounce spells and the like. But generally, the way it's going to work is you get 2 copies of something and an opponent gets 1. And there is a very big, soft political angle, but there's also just the power of getting 2 spells on your side of the field. The 12th Doctor's second ability is whenever you copy a spell, put a +1/+1 counter on the 12th Doctor, but I don't see that being incredibly important. Very nice, don't get me wrong, but not the most important thing. Our companion for the 12th Doctor is Susan Foreman. She's got 2 abilities. She's a Time Lord as well, 1 and a green for a 1/1. And that first ability is about Plane Chase, so if you're playing Plane Chase, there's a benefit to running her. Otherwise, we're really playing her, to tap for a green mana. She's basically a mana dork, but importantly gives our deck the third color, putting it into Temur, red, blue, and green. Alright, so coming back to the deck, since last time we've changed a lot. We've gotten a lot deeper into creatures, which I really like. We've changed a few of the battles around, and we've gotten much fewer sorceries in instant, and almost completely dropped Magecraft. We've also picked up a bunch of really interesting cards, from including Power Balance that I do like, but also things like Bloodbraid Challenger that are also very good. And so at this point, the deck itself has kind of a very straightforward strategy that I do like. We are going to play efficient and powerful setup cards and just basically progress our board state until we have the mana and the means to cast the 12th Doctor. Then we can cast a spell out of not from our hand, and immediately get that first benefit, that first Demonstrate. After that turn cycle, hopefully we're going to be casting bigger and better things and getting more and more advantages from it. Namely, our very, very high mana stuff becomes incredibly scary and incredibly powerful. And with that, we're going to edge out to win the game, especially with some advantage by using one with Multiverse, Future Sight-like abilities, Reality Chip, to start casting more and more spells off the top of our deck, and getting so much advantage that even though our opponents are getting free spells out of this, they can't keep up. Meanwhile, once again, the kind of side plan is to have a bunch of battles and be attacking those battles with our mid-level to high-level creatures, getting more advantage even then. So all in all, kind of an advantage engine. And I'm seeing this as kind of a theme with Lexa. Definitely some of the decks they send me have this. Loot is another one that really catches my eye. And maybe it's just because it's the same colors, but a deck built to make the most out of the resource you have and push itself into the lead quickly and efficiently. That being said, there's a few cards that will still stick out to me as things that don't really fit as well, or I'm not really as interested in keeping. Now, starting with this Moonshade Pixie really caught my eye. This is a adventure, and I do like the amount of adventures we are playing. Adventures are very interesting because we get to get copies out of the creature, not the adventure, because the adventure is usually cast for hand, not always, but generally we will get copies of the creature. Now, Moonshade Pixie is really cool because I like Pixie Dust as being a powerful ability that curves very well into Moonshade herself. But with that being said, this is a effect that I feel that doesn't quite exactly jive with our main strategy. First of all, it is 4 mana to cast the Pixie, and that is quite a bit. But even beyond that, we're generally going to be attacking battles as much as we can. And I think even then, if we can get profitable attacks, are we going to be able to get 3 profitable attacks in a turn? Like, a lot of our creatures are kind of utility pieces for most of the game, not all of the game, that are a little more difficult to fight with, such as Faldorn, such as Six. Even though Six has an attack trigger, we generally don't want to send Six to their death. And likewise, Reality Chip attaches to people. Doc Orlock also is probably not going to attack. Yes, we can give them flying, but I don't know to what degree we're going to be investing in this entire play on one turn. Now, granted, six mana is the turn after we can play the 12th Doctor, going from 5 to 6 mana, but it feels like quite an investment to be playing this card full abilities and hoping to get the most. Like, it's very win more. Like, if you get the full advantage out of this card, I think you're pretty far ahead and already winning the game. So this is a card that I do want to cut. Another flying card that kind of catches my eye is Detective's Phoenix. I really like its inclusion here, but I'm concerned about the reliability of Bestow. Here I'm not going to suggest we immediately take it out because I think there are some reliable ways to put it in the graveyard. We have access to Faithless Looting and a few others. But at the moment, it's a lot of work. And the thing is that I'm not quite sure, when we get the copy of the Bestow ability, does it still attach to the same creature? I believe you still get the same targets, I think. Does Demonstrate let you pick new targets? It does. Demonstrate lets you pick new targets. So we can get 2 enchantments of Detective's Phoenix attached to 2 different creatures, which I think is really, really good. But one of the problems is, so we're giving someone else a Bestow as well, which means they're going to get the full effect, including giving a creature flying that can block our creatures. So this is one of those cards I don't like giving to someone else, but the ceiling is rather high. So I want to keep this, but I want to say I'm a little suspicious about the ability to cast it for its Bestow. Likewise, coming here, I have Iraxa is a card that maybe I didn't bring it up last time, but this is a card that I'm still having a hard time with. It feels like as the deck improves that this is going to continue to be one of the weaker cards that's only good when you're ahead. Because if you are able to trigger Paradox, you're probably winning. And if you're triggering Paradox, you're getting much better cards than a 2/2 token every time. That being said, it does softly work with a lot of other cards on our side of the deck and allows us to do other things, but just comparing it to other cards that we could be casting and that benefit from casting from exile, I think it's kind of on the low side. Going through our 4 drops, because I think that's where a lot of the pressure for me exists, Rampaging Geoderm is sadly, I think, getting too weak for the deck. I think this would have existed in a earlier draft or an in-between draft, but at this point, I'm not sure if I like it enough. Don't get me wrong, a 4/4 haste is something I have suggested with the Rampaging Raptor, but the difference between these 2 cards are night and day, I would say. Rampaging Raptor's ability to, both pump itself, but also just be reasonable damage with, getting 4 damage in and 4 to a battle is basically doubling its damage. And I think that's a lot more reliable and important. And I don't want that many copies of this ability. Where is our... I just saw her. Bloodbraid Elf, I think, is a comparable card where you get an extra card immediately and you have a haster to attack maybe into that very battle. And I think both of these are better than the Rampaging Geoderm, so I think that's a cut. Another one that's here, or I did see it here. Oh, I guess it's gone. Maybe I dreamt it. All right. Going on, Savvy Trader is something that I'm still having a hard time with this card. I mentioned this last time as a card that I'm not very much so impressed with, but I'm going to leave it here. I think what I'll end this thought on is that I prefer, you know what this could be? This could be the Goblin Narcomancer. This card could be Goblin Anarchomancer, and I think I'd have a better time with it. There's two reasons for it. First of all, when it comes to mana reduction, I like mana reducers around 2 mana. I really don't like them beyond that because they generally function as mana rocks in a way that way. They get better when you cast multiple spells, but if you're putting more mana than 2 into them, then they are worse mana rocks until you cast multiple spells in a turn. So Goblin Anarchomancer already is much stronger, I think. And if we read both these cards as this is a card that reduces 1 mana off of not all, but like a good amount of your spells. Savvy Trader, I think, is a harder loop to jump through, but any spell that's exiled will be reduced by 1, whereas the Goblin Anarchomancer will reduce all our red and or green spells, which we have quite a few, by 1. And I would say the only ones we're losing are like Sage of Beyond, Moonshade Pixie, Brazen Borrower, Reality Chip, and then Artful Dodge and Brainstorm can't even be reduced, Surge of Brilliance, and Behold the Multiverse. Also Future Sight and one with the Multiverse. So those ones we're losing, and I guess 1 invasion. I'm at 2 invasions, I missed that. But considering all of the other spells that it would reduce a mana on, I think Goblin Anarchomancer is much better if you want that ability. That being said, you are losing that ETB trigger, which is not nothing. However, I don't know if I would think that 2 mana is worth it just to Ewit a card, kind of. I don't know. I'm a little medium on this. I think it's an efficient card, but I still don't like it. So I'll leave it up to you if you want to keep it. I just think the Anarchomancer is just a much better version of that card. Looking through the rest, if anything else really catches my eye. War Train Slasher, likewise, I think once again is just outclassed by everything else in the deck at this point. Even with the battle synergies, I think this is just too much. I think much more often you'll be happier to have dropped, like Inti or a Questing Druid early and pump them for the purpose of, destroying battles or breaking sieges. Whereas here, I think though War Train Slasher is made to break sieges, they're going to be very bad at it. So I'm thinking of this being cut too. Coming into our instance in sorceries, I think Brainstorm is the card that's just kind of catching my eye. I really do like Brainstorm, and I understand its power within decks that want to play with the top of their deck. But it is not card advantage when you do not have a fetch land. That being said, we're definitely playing fetch lands, and we definitely could play more. And we definitely could play a few more ramp spells that would shuffle our deck. But at the moment, I think there's going to be very real turns that you cast Brainstorm and you're stuck 2 turns of putting bad cards on your deck. And that's not ideal, especially when you have one with the multiverse. Don't get me wrong, Future Sight, actually one with the multiverse is pretty okay here, and Future Sight is still good because you can take the cards you can cast and put them on top of your deck. I understand the synergy, but at the moment it just kind of stands out that if you have a bunch of lands in hand and then you brainstorm into more lands, you're just absolutely miserable, and Future Sight basically does not have text, right? That's more of my concern, but the opportunity cost to play a 1 mana blue instant is pretty low. I don't know. I just wanted to point that out. One more thing, I noticed that we didn't put in Dryad Arbor, and I guess this is an addition, but I still think we should be playing it. because we have Invasion of Ikoria, and just being able to pull it out of our deck for free while getting a very powerful battle onto the battlefield is still worth it. And I don't think you're too sad if you get to play it, because it can attack into battles pretty nicely. So that's what I would say. All right, let's go into additions proper. So the biggest one I really, really want to add is Party Thrasher. This is definitely, I think, the strongest MH3 card. Don't get me wrong, the Power Balance card is very, very cool, but Party Thrasher is even better. Not only do you immediately gain Convoke for all of your battles, all of your non-creature spells, which you have a ton of when you are casting them in any other way, Party Thrasher themselves is also very, very good at exiling a card out of, like exiling 2 cards, and you pick one of the 2 every turn in exchange for a card from your hand. This is very, very strong. 1/4 is just a great stat line. I've been seeing this card be played in Modern. It's so, so strong. And I think, especially at this price point, it's definitely worth picking up for a number of Exile Matters or Cast from Exile Matters decks with red. So absolutely play this. This is the suggestion. This is the big one. After that, I want to talk about Mana Ramp, because, and two versions. We have these 4 2-mana spells, and then we have the Cultivate spells. Now, I think generally you should be playing the 2-mana spells, and I would do pretty much a 3-for-3 here, where we take the Talismans out and we put the Mana Ramps. I'll leave it up to you if you want to play the Cultivates, and there's 2 reasons for that. One, I think when we have built a deck that's able to play cards off of the top of its deck or out of exile, like we have so much pseudo draw, having the mana to keep playing spells is really, really going to matter. And it's going to make a very big difference as you spiral out of control. If you had watched recently on MTG Mudsta's account, we did the MH3 precons. We did the MH3 precons, and I got the Simic deck. And in that first game, I used, like, I did this very flashy thing, and that's what everyone remembers. But the really big thing that allowed the deck to function is the sheer amount of mana production that it had, in addition to really good card draw. At this moment, this deck has really good card draw, or pseudo card draw, or impulsive draw. What it's desperately lacking is the mana to set up with that. And though the Talismans are similar and do similar things, this is where the second half of the ramp is really good, is that it shuffles your deck. And I think that's very, very relevant as we do have these future sight abilities, these reality chips. So being able to cast this and shuffle your deck is going to be a very reasonable thing to do to attempt to keep going. Brainstorm, of course, gets a little better with all these shuffle effects, and I'm less keen on getting rid of it. Finally, it's worth considering that giving someone a talisman versus ramping them aren't the same things, and they have some benefits and they have some downsides. So for example, if you have Nature's Lore or 3 Visits, and one of your opponents is in Dimir, you can demonstrate this spell on them basically for free, which is something I particularly like. Likewise, if you have an opponent who's mono green, rare as it is, you can cast Farseek and demonstrate with them, and they also can't grab anything. This is important because I think not only does every other deck benefit from any mana rock, not just because it is mana, but also because it's an artifact. You can use these like one-sidedly and basically turn them into I can't remember the name, but any of those 4 mana Farseek, Cultivate, Ramp cards. And that's just going to rocket you ahead. But also, you still get to use these in a political manner of giving these, finding your opponent who desperately needs a 3 Visits or just a Rampant Growth, and giving them that demonstrated copy so they can stay in the game in exchange for a favor, for removal, etc., etc. So I find them to be much stronger. Is Cultivate level mana ramp necessary? I don't think so, but the first one is probably not the worst thing. It is card advantage. You are taking 2 cards for 1 card, even though it doesn't feel like divination. It is kind of divination. So I do like it, but I don't know if I wouldn't play more than 1, and I don't even know if I'd play the 1, but I'd like to put that there. Another card that I was thinking about is Ghostly Flicker, and it doesn't have to be exactly Ghostly Flicker, but I think the first one should be like the first of this effect, the first flicker effect you can play. that can flicker any permanent, I think is going to be good. Now, this one's specific. I forgot about this. Let's see if we can find a flicker effect that hits permanents, because I just realized this won't hit battles. Now, what this will hit is what the battles turn into, and I think that's the main reason I wanted that there. But it would be nice if you could have something that that's horribly misspelled. That took a little more finagling than it looked. The only one I can find is Teferi's Time Twist that will exile a permanent and return it. Maybe there's some that aren't necessarily in that color, but this is the one I found that I think is one that can like flicker your battles or do something in these colors. Yeah, it does look like this is the only one. So this might be worth playing. Of course, Ghostly Flicker is better because it will hit two cards, which I think is a lot better. But that being said, I still think one of these effects are going to be really good. This is also notable because it only targets your permanents, so when you demonstrate it, you're not afraid of losing your things. But even then, I don't see you demonstrating this card because how often are you going to be able to do something meaningful with the second one? Like, you need a lot of permanents that you want to flicker for Ghostly Flicker the second time to be good, because since they'll lose targets in between, you can't pick the same targets twice. So I think the first one is pretty free to play, but I'll leave it up to you. Then a battle that caught my eye that we aren't playing, mainly because I was thinking about flickering permanents, was Invasion of Ixalan. This just can look at the top 5 to put a permanent in hand, and then turns into a pretty decent creature that can be very easily made into indestructible. I think this is just kind of cool because the majority of our cards are permanents now. It used to be we had a lot more instants and sorceries, but now we're down to like 7 instants or sorceries. So this hits almost all of the time, and I do really, really like this. So I think this is pretty free to play, and I think you would benefit from it. So this is a nice one. The last one on terms of permanence on the same way, Storm the Festival is starting to get interesting. Now, at this mana cost, I think I would consider replacing Future Sight with it, I think. Because then you have Future Sight, you have Reality Chip, you have one with the Multiverse, and every other card that kind of does this ability. So we're getting kind of stuck at the 5 mana mark, and I think Storm the Festival at 6 mana might be like a little too much, but I do really like it. I really like just the same thing, that we can get 2 permanents out in play. And now granted, it's only 5 mana or less permanents, so it won't hit everything, but it'll hit nearly everything. And then because it has flashback naturally, we can use this to very easily trigger off of our commander, getting this demonstrated. That being said, this is a heck of a card to demonstrate. You have to be very, very confident with to whom you are demonstrating this with, because they're getting quite a bit of advantage. But getting to do this spell twice is really, really good, and it's just on my mind. Once again, I don't know if it's particularly good. Think about how you could get it in this terrible black and white, so I'll leave it up to you. Finally, the last few cards are kind of what you might think as boring additions, but they are necessary, which is of course the Rapid Hybridization, Pongify, and Lightning Bolt. I think at this point, the deck is nearing completion to a state that we can start testing it very aggressively. Lexa didn't say anything about if they had been testing it, and if you have, let me know, because I'd love to know what testing has found. But at this point, when we're getting ready to start going into testing, I think some removal is really important, because I'm pretty sure Into the Fire is our only, it's not even targeted removal. We really don't have any meaningful removals, so having a few really low mana cards that are going to just give us a huge amount of advantage by trading, some really big cards for it, and giving us a bit of a pressure release valve when we give an opponent a flaming Tyrannosaurus and we need to not have them actually have it. Granted, this is probably not the best example because it has a dies trigger, but let's say instead, we give them one of these scorpions and we don't want them to have it. At least being able to destroy it and keep 2 on our own side, it's something. Is it something great? I don't know. I think most of the time those removal spells will be pointed at your opponents. So With that in mind, that's my additions for the deck. I think we're really in a good place and we're going in a good direction, and therefore I don't have tons and tons of things to say. I really like this. I want to see more. I think the next step is we have to see how the battles do. And for that, I really recommend you go and do some testing. Let me know if we go into a next draft how that testing goes and how accessible the battles are. I'm kind of worried about these higher mana battles, and a lot of the way my brain works when we do any kindred decks or any theme decks is that we don't play all of them, we play the best ones. So there might be a universe where we cut down on some of the higher mana ones for the lower mana ones just because they're much more wieldy. So that'll depend on how accessible flipping battles, breaking sieges is, and we won't know until we test it. I realize now I've said both siege and siege. I'll leave that up to you to decide. Thank you so much, Lexa, for sending this deck and the second draft. I'm really excited for where it's going, so good luck and happy deck building. Thank you so much for watching. This video is brought to you by viewers like you and people on my Patreon. If you'd like to send me another draft of this deck, or any deck, there is a link in the video description down below. And if you'd like to make your deck one of my donation decks I work on, there's a link there too. Finally, if you'd like to like, comment, subscribe, I would be very appreciative. It helps the channel quite a bit. Thank you and good luck in brewing and building.